That's true. We did,
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry to cut you off. 7 o'clock, go.
Yep.
Welcome, everybody, to our Planning Commission meeting this evening. Let's go ahead and get started with a Pledge of Allegiance. If y'all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So, our prayer and thought tonight is not here. So instead, Corey, could you just take a minute maybe and explain our new textbooks?
So, the Utah Land Institute, and I think it's in conjunction with the Property Rights Ombudsman Office, they'll put out publication and training materials. This is a modern update, so we'd call it a remix from the past publications. If you know Chair Hershey, David Hershey, that was on the Planning Commission, I think he's still on Utah Land Institute Board. He's chair, but he was past chair. I think he's still there.
His name's in the book,
Yeah.
right at the beginning.
So basically it just says here please accept our compliments, several copies of the ground rules for your handbook to the land use regulation. The Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman maintains a land use training fund using the 1% surcharge on the building permit fees collected by the Utah Department of Commerce. The cost of these books, as well as shipping and handling, was paid for from that fund. And basically, they're saying, please distribute these copies to following officials in your town, elected members of the city or town council, our commission, members of the planning commission, members of the board of adjustment, and for those listed above already have the book, then they sent too many. So they're basically just looking at our postings of who's on the board. So if you need training, this letter offers training to you also from the Ombudsman Office. And so, happy reading. I suggest that when it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you're finding it difficult to sleep, pull it out, start perusing it. Your eyes will get heavy. But it's good. Commissioner Kerr brought up that it's updated with some case law from the past, so it kind of brings things up into the modern era. So,
Well, it looks really accessible as well, like the previous information that we had before was pretty thick and pretty dense, and this looks like it's pretty accessible to be able to reference, and I'm looking forward to it.
How many
Sounds
chapters?
I'm serious.
12?
I don't know. I think it looks great. So
All right. On that note, now everybody knows why you got a new book there, so. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the business at hand. The first item has been scheduled for a public hearing. This is the MacArthur Conceptual Site Plan. It's an administrative decision. We'll turn the time over to Mackenzie.
Thank you. Let me make sure I've got YouTube all proper. Okay,
And make sure you got your microphone turned up
I'll
because
do that. Yeah, hold on.
you've got a soft voice.
Got a soft voice and a mask tonight. Okay. So item number 1 is a conceptual site plan application for Robert MacArthur. Mark Green, who I think is here, the agent working on this. It's this parcel highlighted in red on 400 East, just north of London Road. But it is outside a platted subdivision, and so conceptual site plan kicked in. We have as one of the Planning Commission goals this type of application to streamline it so that unplatted lots don't have to go through this 2-step process or just a slightly different process, so that it's maybe less time constraint for the applicant. So this parcel is in the residential low zone, and it needs to meet the following development standards, which it does on all counts. One thing to note, we have the minimum frontage versus the minimum width, and that's just the width of the lot needs to be 60 feet wide after the front setback. And as you can tell, it does narrow towards the back, but it still meets that minimum width. The only thing particularly about this lot that really requires the conceptual site plan is that it's not connected to the South Davis Sewer District sewer line in 400 East, and it doesn't have all of the public utility easements. So that's mostly why we're here. They've proposed easements that match city standards. They've also proposed a connection to the South Davis sewer line, and staff have reviewed their proposals and find them acceptable to city standards, and so staff recommends acceptance of this conceptual site plan. Also noted in the recommended language is that 2A and 2B, you can accept it as is, or have it referred to the zoning administrator so that the next step can just go to the staff instead of coming back with basically the same application, but just back to the planning commission. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Mackenzie.
No comment.
Just curious, in this case, their connection to the sewer, is that able to be done on 4th East, or does it have to go a different way because of the slope of the lot?
It will happen on 4th East.
Okay.
The only slight hitch for them is that we just paved 4th East, so there's a little bit more cost to it right now.
Chair Daley, I also know that the city engineer was a little bit, I wouldn't call it concerned, just obviously when you have a new road, cutting into it's kind of one of those moments. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some discussion, and I think they're talking with the sewer district up to the resident, that they would be able to tie in down on the west side of the lot into a neighbor's sewer and wanted to have that conversation with the applicant simply from the fact of, is if there's an opportunity and the sewer district would do it, it might be cheaper than cutting into the road and doing a large patch. So there may be some cost savings as well as a benefit to maybe not cutting in, but I think we just let the sewer district and the applicant work that out as they see best.
Yeah.
But sewer is available according to the district.
Okay. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Mackenzie. Anybody else have any questions for staff? Okay. Given that, we will go ahead and give the applicant time to speak to this matter if they would like to. Don't have to, but
Yeah, I don't think they're here.
okay. That settles that. They're not here. So this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, and we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, give anybody an opportunity to come forward to the microphone and speak to this particular issue if you'd like to. Again, you don't have to. But... No? Want to make sure nobody has any nerves and they just need somebody to break the ice?
Did you say the property to the west?
Yeah. You want to come up and
Oh, there we go.
come to the microphone and...
I'm the guy next door to the north.
So
I'm super excited for Robert to get here, so I'm just,
Introduce yourself real quick.
Ted Anderson.
Perfect.
I live on 701 North, 400 East. Anyways, just one, did you say to the west, right?
That's my understanding. I heard the engineer and public works director talking, and sometimes the sewer district lets you tie into other lines.
Okay,
And so.
which is fine, I just was wondering.
So they were discussing, I mean, obviously the city's like, well, if we can avoid a cut in the road, but you can cut in the road. But the advantage is if there was an opportunity, our road cut patch is fairly significant.
Yeah,
And so we're just evaluating a cost effectiveness of doing that.
okay. Just wondering. Anyways, I'm excited. I like Robert, he's a good dude.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Anybody else, now that the ice is broken? No? Okay. Then we will go ahead and close the public hearing. That's good. I always like, he's a good dude in the public hearing. That's great. Yeah, it's good. All right. Any further questions or comments for staff before we discuss this amongst the commission? No? I would propose that we take the 2A approach to allow this to be handled by the zoning administrator rather than wait until a future scheduled planning commission meeting. If anybody disagrees, I'd love to hear about it. No? Okay.
Great. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll try.
Go for it.
I hereby make a motion for the planning commission to accept the conceptual site plan for the property located at approximately 693 North, 400 East, parcel 02-096-0096 with the following directives. 1, and then 2A, 3, and then suggested findings A.
Just A.
Yeah,
Just
just A.
Second.
Perfect. A motion and a very confident second. Any discussion on the motion? No? Then let's start down on this end if we could.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Perfect, that motion passes. Thanks, everyone. Let's move along then to the next item on our agenda. This is the Trump Small Subdivision Waiver Extension Request. We'll turn the time over to Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair Daly. Making sure my mic's still up. Okay. So the applicant, Bradley Trump, has requested a 6-month extension, and in the municipal code, section 1502070E, that provides an opportunity for that extension. It does limit it to just one 6-month extension. Otherwise, the application expires at 12 months if there's not a recorded plat. As yet, there is no recorded plat, so I reached out to Mr. Trump to find if he wanted an extension. So he requested an extension. I've provided the information he gave me and then a recommended approval motion, but I know the applicant is here tonight if you would like to ask him questions.
Okay, perfect. All right, any questions for Mackenzie on this one?
So question on the 6 months, was that applicant requested? Is that what we impose? Is that in our ordinance?
That's what the applicant requested.
Okay.
It is in our ordinance. and
yeah.
the
Ordinance
applicant-
limits it
They
to
just
6.
have to apply before it actually expires.
Yeah.
If it expires, then they have to come back and reapply.
For every 6-month period, or is it?
Well, they're only allowed one 6-month extension for a small subdivision waiver.
Got it.
So if this 6-month, if they don't get it recorded by December 23rd, then they'd have to reapply
Okay,
if you grant it.
then we would potentially see the Trumps for a third time, fourth time? Third time, yeah. Let's hope not.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions for staff? No, we will then invite the applicant to come forward and speak on this and maybe just give us a quick rundown of the progress of the project and.
Yes, thank you very much, Bradley Trump. So with the waiver extension and things, I think the biggest issue about getting this completed is first and foremost my own ignorance about the process and working with my engineer and things like that. I've been taking things one step at a time because I bought a boom lift to help me build my home that kind of took away a lot of my liquid assets. And so I talked with my banker in order to do the bonds and the fees and the plat and everything. I would need to draw my construction loan first. And so basically I'm moving forward. The plat is all squared away, and if I had everything to pay the bonds and stuff like that and the fees, and this wouldn't be an issue. But I'm waiting for a provisional building permit approval that then the bank will say, all right, as long as we got a provisional, then the bank says we'll go ahead and move forward with like a construction loan, and then once I get that, I can draw and pay all the fees and bonds all at once, but that's why there's the delay. So, and as far as where I'm at with that process, happily on December 8th is when I got the feedback and had the red line items that I need to correct for the building permit and things like that, and I got that immediately forwarded to my engineer, and then just a few days ago I got it all back and I forwarded it to the city. So it's one of those things when you're getting a good deal from folks, you're kind of on the bottom list, and so it took 5 months to get those red line items back and get the amended architecture and stuff like that, and so that's been really the delay in everything. Certainly no lack of motivation or determination, desire.
Perfect. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Trump?
I feel his pain.
Yeah.
Like, I work a lot with that world, and it just got bogged down. Like, it's literally not his fault. Like,
Yeah.
I believe you 100 from my own experience. Like, it's just terrible right now.
And my boom lift mechanic, he said he'd come and fix something, and we're 8 months waiting. So, just busy folks, and I'm not one to be the squeaky wheel, just because I trust that, you know, if somebody asks me to do something, I said I'll do it, then I'll do it when I get to it. So I'm like, okay, I can trust that they're doing their best. But my dad always said the squeaky wheel gets the oil, so I think I need to just squeak a little bit more, because I do give a poke here and there, but
Yeah.
not enough, I think. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully we don't have to see you again. Okay, let's see. We don't need a public hearing for something like this, right? So, any other questions, comments, thoughts, concerns? No? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I will.
Great.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to accept the small subdivision approval extension, 6 months, for the property located at 470 East, 400 South, subject to the following items number 1 and 2, with suggested findings A.
I'll second.
All right, Heidi, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that motion? Okay, and we'll start down this end this time.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect, that motion passes. Thank you. Okay,
Good luck.
good luck indeed. Okay, so now we're going to talk about parking. We love talking about parking here. So let's go ahead. This is a public hearing, legislative decision. Let's go ahead and turn the time over to Corey.
Thank you, Chair Daley. Members of the commission, you're very familiar with the different tables and our parking updates and how we got here with a goal of the commission, raising some concerns in the past. We used ESI engineering to look at some of the identified land uses, and we also ended up extending that discussion into the stacked parking spaces. And so the only thing I believe you should see changes to your last review is the stacked parking spaces. Most of it is just spelling out some language. The significant change that was directed by the commission is to look at the fast food. You had the study that had 12 spaces and 240 feet, I believe was the original one, based on a 20-foot depth. Our ordinance bases it on an 18-foot depth. So you see the difference between 240 to 216 is just simply 20 to the 18-foot depth. So I just stayed consistent with our ordinance of what we define. So that gives you 216 feet. Now, whether that's split up into 3 lanes or 2 lanes will come at a later time. But that was the significant one that was discussed by the commission, and that is other than the spelling change, not spelling, but calling out spaces and the numeric 3. I left all the numerics as they were basically in the ordinance. So I don't know why 3 was spelled out, the rest were not. But I think that's all that was changed from your last review.
So it looks like, Corey, you just kind of cleaned up a little bit, some language under parking modifications and shared parking.
Right.
Could you just really quickly talk about the thought there?
Yeah, the initial part that we talked about really early on was how frequently modifications were coming to you. And it seemed to be a predominant perspective that if we're modifying, and I think staff even supported it, if we're modifying things on a regular basis, should we not be checking the ordinance? And then we've hit that part about, is 12 stacking lanes for fast food, if it's popular, or sufficient? So it seems like we never quite get our arms around everything. And so I had recommended that we keep the parking modification, but we probably narrow in some parameters associated with that. And so we talked about, I believe, the issue of how we handle parking counts on off-site. An example was the Bridge Community Church borrowed a lot of off-site if that went away for whatever reason, somebody maximizes it, just notifying the zoning administrator that you can't use it anymore doesn't really solve the matter. So we stepped back into it and said, well, if we give a parking modification, so we go back to the Dave's Auto, where they had a significant addition to the building, there was debate, okay, you only need a minimal amount of stalls. Your existing site was able to accommodate double that and still keep your addition. And so we started talking about the issues of landscaping needs to be installed. We don't want to compromise the landscaping unless there's a reason to give a waiver. So that's a separate process if we do that. And we also wanted to be careful about additions and expansions of sites that was so aggressive under a modification proof that if it came into a reuse building situation, we severely lacked the parking. We're severely underparked. And so we started putting those kind of parameters on the modification. And then we pulled out a little bit that the ordinance is really centered around the commercial office, and we added non-industrial uses to the shared idea. And that's because the warehousing was so nebulous on what it eventually could be. I come in and say, I only need 1 per 1,000. And then we had the whole discussion of, well, I'm converting it to a vocational school. I'm converting it to a dance studio. I'm converting the flex space into batting cages. That's happened in the past. And we have a very narrow list. So we did change the industrial. We talked about adding the 20,000 square feet or 15, I don't remember what it was. And then we'll add, so that's going to be your base that you have to do. But I left in the industrial uses because we still have the issue that they could argue a warehouse. And we have a very narrow list of uses in the industrial. Now, this is where I think a policy matters discussion. I thought, well, it's such a narrow amount of industrial uses, we just shouldn't include industrial uses in the call out, because most of all of our uses you can get under the commercial very high. Industrial adds very little use. Just by way of full disclosure, parsing that out, is that a good thing? Is it a comfortable, defensible thing that we went in and said, okay, you and you, no parking modification? And so I bring that back up in a rethought about this process, is we did go into industrial uses and added more aggressive parking. Should or should we not allow industrial uses to have that same opportunity? I still feel a little hesitant, but I also recognize that parsing out a couple of uses seems a little bit aggressive, unsupported, I don't know. So I just bring that up as a policy question of, do we feel that removing industrial uses entirety from a modification is warranted, if we're leaving modification opportunities in? So I think that summarizes my thoughts on those sections that we talked about in the past.
Okay.
If you have a question and a specific one, let me know.
Yeah, let me ask you specifically, under that parking modification, 1252-110, B3, you added C, well, you struck what was C and D and added a new C, right?
Right.
So basically saying, can't make any changes unless you get a new modification. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to get rid of the whole notify the zoning administrator part. So you're getting out of it entirely?
Yeah, I just think it's useless. You notify the zoning administrator and
What do you do? Right? Is that kind of the thought? Like, you notify, you get.
thanks, we know you're potentially under parked now.
But you have, zoning administrator has no then action once you've been notified, like you don't have any,
No, the only thing would go to back and say, okay, if there's something changes, we're going back to the commission and reevaluating it. Because I don't really have authority to say, no, you can't notify me.
why do you think it was in there in the first place?
That's a surmised. My editorial is just, somebody was like, Well, if they have to notify the city, it'll make them think twice.
Don't go telling Dad.
I don't know if that was the original, but that's what I would surmise, is you had to have some type of notification process so that we'd be aware the parking went away. But there wasn't a lot of teeth to say,
What now?
we're taking away your approval now.
Yeah, right, what now?
So, under the way that it's proposed here is, what, we just wait for a complaint then?
And well, the issue has come back in is that you've done this parking modification, and we're evaluating it on this site.
Uh-huh.
And we're just saying that any changes to the site, if that goes away, we want the original parking count back if you want to make any changes. And if you can't get the original back, we want you to go through another modification to justify the addition and enlargement. But you're right, this says, be serious about the parking modification because it becomes perpetual to
But they're
that
gonna-
particular use. Because modifications are tied to that use and that approval, not other future uses in the building.
But you're gonna get notified anyway when the use changes, because they're gonna come in and get a new business license or something, right?
Right.
Or if the site changes, you're gonna get notified, because now
We're
we've
gonna
got a site plan change and whatever.
Right. But I do think it creates a policy that says if 75% of your parking's off-site, we're probably not doing a modification. And I don't know if I'd put a parameter in on that.
Number 7 down there a little bit lower, the total.
Not more than 70% of the original.
Not more than 70%. Okay. And then back to what you were talking about under C with it's commercial, office, and then adding in non-industrial use.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just, yeah, ask your question.
Well, that's what you were talking about a minute ago is in non-industrial, but, well, what else is there that's non-industrial that we haven't already covered?
Yeah, I think there's only like 3 or 4 industrial uses in the use list, if I recall.
And you're saying, but I mean, under this, well, that's the use again, not the
yeah.
zoning.
That's
Not
what
the
I wanted to
zoning.
make sure.
Yeah,
Just the use.
we're just talking about the use. So when you put the dance studio in an industrial zone, that's
You're
different.
still falling back into where you're in the commercial, because dance studios and so forth are already called out in the commercial. It's that warehousing, transportation service where we know you have a dockyard for UPS, FedEx, things of that nature.
Okay.
So
What
I
did
just
you
kind of
have?
want to talk about the overlap between use and zone, and specifically because industrial has been the headache that has caused, or the situation that has caused a lot of headache based on zone and use. And I just want to hear if you think what has been proposed addresses what we continued to see, which was the issue between that push and pull between zoning and usage, specifically in that industrial
Yeah.
zone.
Parking is on the use, not by zone.
Okay.
So that's one significant difference of the way the parking will look at the uses. So we call out different uses and not zone.
Even with new build?
Yeah, new build.
I think that's the problem though, right? Because when you look at a site plan, an initial site, a conceptual
And
site
you're looking
plan,
at zoning and use permitted or conditional.
because we're going to look at a conceptual site plan for an industrial zone, the assumption is it's industrial use usually.
Well, they list it out because they've got to call out what they want their parking to be. And this is where I think the flex space goes under the radar, is they'll come into you and say, yeah, I'm in the
Oh, we're
industrial
gonna do
zone, I'm
this."
doing warehouse, flex
Warehouse.
space. And then all of a sudden, we get 5 applications for everything that's in the commercial use list.
Yeah, so I don't know that this is addressing the issue that we've continued to see.
Right, and that's where I bring back up to, there's a little bit of hesitancy, but if you go back up to the industrial use, it's the wholesale warehousing that they were falling under that flex space. And so we do call out your first 20,000 square feet as a different parking. You can't just walk in and say, we're saying you're doing 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet up to the first 20,000. So we're going to get some more parking than somebody coming in and saying, Well, I got 10,000 square feet, and 1,000, that's 10 parking stalls, that's all I need.
So when they come in with a conceptual site plan, they say, we're gonna do whatever, a dance studio,
Yeah, we're gonna go back up to the dance studio list and apply that
which is
parking
gonna be
standard.
higher than 3 per thousand, probably, right? It's not on this list, is it? No. But, yeah, anyway, so we're gonna go back and apply those parking standards to it.
Yep. They have to identify their uses, and the way they hit it was just calling it flex space.
Call the whole thing flex space. I got a kitchen, a bathroom, a small office, and 19,000 square feet of warehouse.
Oh, and what about the reconversion, even if it's not flex space, even if it's like, yeah, we're truly gonna be warehouse or whatever, and then there's suddenly like, oh, there's a need for dance studio, or there's a need for church, or whatever it is, that's a lot of times where we get into this issue. It's like they're changing the use, and suddenly you're bound by the physicality of what it was when it was built, not,
Right, but I think that that's what, this helps with that, though, because if they come in with a kind of a blank slate, they're not exactly sure what they're gonna put in there, the temptation or the process in the past was just call the whole thing warehouse, and that gives
so
you.
this is addressing that in a way that you think is gonna
Yeah, because
solve it.
they would get very minimal parking under warehouse, then they come in and they stick a Coconut Cove in there and whatever else, and all of a sudden we need tons and tons of parking. But this way, you go, we're
3
not.
per thousand for the first 20,000 square feet is an automatic. Then you're down to the 1 per thousand after that.
Yeah, so we're gonna essentially triple the required amount of,
Up till 20,000.
up to 20,000,
And then
yeah.
lessen it.
Yeah.
How many 20,000 foot, like, just give me some reference, like, what size is 20,000 feet from some of the
So if you go
places?
across from Public Works, Don Youngblood building, that block building right directly across, that's 17,000 square feet.
17?
And has 11 parking stalls,
Right in front,
Mackenzie, something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And if you see, they've struggled because they wanted to open up a gym
Yeah.
Yeah,
initially
we've
when
seen
they
that one
built
before.
that.
Okay.
And the assembly area is way different than what he became approved for. And
Uh-huh.
so that created some tension, the gym wasn't able to come through. They were upset with us, and they've done some smaller uses. But that's a perfect example of a building too large for its britches.
Yeah.
Is that an official zoning term?
Yes, britches. Let's work that into the zoning code if we can,
Yeah,
britches.
put that right in there with,
Same with
good guy.
good dude.
Good dude. Good dude with his britches. Okay, thank you. I think that answers my question, and I really, just going down to wholesale and warehousing, I think that helps address a lot of the concerns that I
I
have.
still think we're at some risk
You do?
in the sense of 3 per thousand is different than a retail or something more aggressive. If you look at it, did we change the office down to 3?
But do you feel like it's a
did.
good, like, middle ground from
I think it's a
where-
good middle ground.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's a good middle ground as well, because if somebody truly wants to build a warehouse, they don't need
a
a
retail,
million
They don't.
parking spots,
They
right?
don't.
But,
which
yeah.
I don't want to do. I don't want to overpark us.
I agree, I 100% agree.
I just don't want to have that situation where we continue to have to make a modification.
Modify
over and
everything.
Over and over and over. I think this looks like great middle ground.
I agree.
I appreciate your work on this, Corey.
Well, it's educated guessing.
It's not, it's educated experiential guessing.
Guessing,
We've had
yeah,
some
that's
experience.
good.
So real quickly,
Official zoning term now.
Yes.
under that parking modification section there, under B, mixed-use development, do we need to make sure we add the ment to the end of develop?
Probably, when I say.
So, all right, what else did anybody want to talk about with respect to any of these proposed changes?
I think it looks good.
I think you can debate it forever and ever, and we should just give it a try.
I agree.
You're,
I think it's an improvement.
Yes.
Yeah, I
For
totally.
sure. And I don't know that there's going to be a perfect scenario for everything.
No, you can't
You
solve
can't
all
foresee
problems
that.
before you even know what they are. So
No.
I say go fight win.
go
I
fight
really
win.
like it.
Okay,
As my teenagers say, send it.
send it, yeah,
Send,
that's right.
full send.
On that note, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so let's go ahead and open up the public hearing, invite anybody who would like to speak to this to do so. No? Okay, that's fine. We will go ahead and close the public hearing now. All right. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
I would like to make a motion.
Great.
I hereby make a motion to recommend approval of the proposed zoning ordinance text amendments with the change to developments regarding off-street parking as depicted in red text of the attachment of the staff report with suggested reasons for action A through D.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion to the motion? Okay, then where are we? We're over here.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Perfect, thank you. That motion passes.
I have a personal note. That's a resounding aye. I've really personally been excited about making this happen, so thank you to staff for
Yes.
efforts to make a really educated, experiential guess on what could really improve parking in our city, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the city council says about it as well. And, you know, make sure you let them know that we did not take this matter lightly. This was something that
Let's put some effort into it.
we have been talking about this and reviewed it, and you've worked on it really hard, so hopefully they know that this isn't just a knee-jerk reaction to something, so. Okay, let's go ahead, move on. We're cruising right along here. We have item number 4, moderate income housing update. Corey.
Thank you, Chair Daley. Members of the commission, appreciate you allowing the staff to add this to the agenda for a discussion with you. City council seems to be pretty in-depth with their work sessions for the budget and some other items. So we haven't had a chance to meet as a body, and I'm anticipating that through the month of June, we probably will not. And even in talking the scheduling about this presentation, there was thoughts of not going to the council until July. And I was a little bit hopeful that they would do it sooner to receive the same presentation, which it sounds like next week they've agreed to. But it's important because we have some deadlines to meet with the new bill. So waiting for some time seemed a little bit, each year on our report, we're always just kind of pushing it right to the end of the deadline. And I didn't quite want to do that with this one, given the significant changes at the state legislature this year. So it was HB, House Bill 462. I know Lisa, I think McKinsey was there on the Zoom meeting with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. I was there. We also got training, McKinsey and I, at our luncheon for the luncheon speaker, keynote speaker at our conference on the legislative update, and they talked about these matters. And I think there was also a session devoted, and I attended the session devoted to this. So hopefully I have a little bit of understanding of what we're doing. It's fairly simple in the sense this year, but I think it's a significant matter of discussion on our commitment as a city. As you know, the moderate income housing bill is in the early 2000s, required to the city. There was a significant update to that in 2012, required. I think we did an update in 2013 or 14 to our moderate income housing. But essentially what the state is indicating to cities is we're going to step up a little bit of the game in your moderate income housing. This was pointed out at our legislative update at the Planning Commission. Is it's interesting where the legislature is now, typically general plans only have to be adopted as an advisory document. It still sits that way. But there are things that are entering into it to say it's getting closer and closer to mandatory. And that's an interesting dynamic in itself on, state having influence, allowing autonomy to municipalities and county. And there's a few items that are merging to be more significant and mandatory. The penalties in the past have been somewhat light in the sense of if somebody proves you're using zoning nefariously, that's another planning term, you could be in trouble. And then there was efforts in the past to say, well, we're going to do and rate the different cities on how well they did their moderate income housing. And then they came back and said, okay, we're going to get the Department of Workforce Services involved, and now you have to report to them. And that was every other year. Now it's turned to every year. This one contains a little bit stiffer carrot. It's not a penalty per se, but it is a little stiffer carrot to the city. And so I think it's that step to, we're moving to general plans to have a little bit more effort in their advisory role. And what does that mean into the future? So this is produced by the Utah League of Cities and Towns in conjunction with Wasatch Front Regional Council and Workforce Services. I cut out a few slides, just a little bit of time, particularly those slides that were cut out from the presentation, if you've had it, was if you were a station area on a fixed transit guideway, you had to add some additional expectations. We're not so far. I don't know how that'll eventually play out in the long run. So I cut out those slides and reduced it a little bit. We can go to, let's see, I don't know if the slide's up there for others. So we can skip the agenda and we'll just go to purpose and objective slide. Good. So the first two in there is pretty non-substantive in the sense of what you do. You're to meet the needs of people and income levels and working in your community, allow people various incomes to benefit and participate in the neighborhood. Those are great 30,000-foot level goals, but what does it mean? And 3 starts going into that, okay, jurisdiction, you're going to be asked some questions. We want you to provide reasonable opportunity to meet, in the next 5 years. And that's always been really difficult because I think I've continually said that no matter what we build in Centerville, it's not been affordable. The units that are over by the megaplex, that's a density very foreign to a small community like Centerville. That nets at 24 units an acre. 3 bedrooms are renting at $1,800 or more a month. We can't build to make it affordable. And that's kind of frustration because each city may have different dynamics. And townhomes, the idea of the townhomes behind Dave's Auto Porter Walton Park, remember those? They were selling up to $400,000 when those first went in. So even when we weren't in the housing inflation, the location still drove the supply and demand model. So it's been very difficult. But they've wanted you to be cognizant. So the idea is what's in your community, what's it made up of? Workforce Service put out some data. Everybody agrees that that data model is not really as viable as it should be, so there'll be some changes. And now they're adding 4 about funding. This is where it's a penalty, but not a penalty, depending on how you look at it. But it's riding on the heels of being a penalty. So let's go to the applicability slide. Sorry, I don't have numbers. Past the highlights to the applicability. We fall, I believe, in the class 4 population. I think that's 11,000 to something else. I think we're class 4 city. So we're required. We're in the category of requirement. It's applicable to us. And so we have to come up with how we're going to do that. There is a deadline of October 1st. It's somewhat a simple deadline for reporting back to them, a little more complex on we have to strategize what we have to do. Let's go to where we start with the strategy now, strategy previously. My intent is not to go over all the strategies. I think it's one more. Yeah. My intent is not to go over each strategy per se, allow you an opportunity and the council an opportunity to have this document and look at it. But if you look through, the state had a number of strategies in the original moderate income housing expectation. And we went ahead and called them all out just in our moderate income housing element. Probably ought to pare that down now that we're changing and shifting a little bit of direction. They required you to have 3 strategies picked. We picked 3 strategies, called them out in our moderate income housing. But you can see that now that they're going through the strategies and they're making specific edits. They're trying to change it from facilitate, which was loose, to demonstrate. So that's a significant word change to these strategies. So if you look at it, consider, now identify and utilize. So they're getting stronger on their language on the different goals. And so we can just skip through that and go to strategies new, starting at Q. These are additions. So this is elements that they're coming back and saying you can start picking from these kind of things. So look at S, just for sake of, that's been on my mind in a bigger, weird plan or place. Create a program to transfer development rights for moderate income housing. Wow, transfer of development rights is a big project. You're basically saying, here's an area we want to preserve. So let's just pick Hillside in Centerville, or a sensitive land area. Here's an area we want to preserve. It would have X amount of density. Well, we want to preserve that hillside, so we'll take that density, transfer it to another receiving zone. That's a big, and where is that receiving zone? Example is Park City, Summit County use this because they want ridgeline protections. They put them in conservation, land use conservation easements, and those densities are transferred and sold. So a farmer or a landowner in an area can get a purchase, somebody can purchase their development rights to them, transferred to a receiving zone, and the development density is built there, and the conservation area is put in place, and a land trust conservation manages the property after that.
And that's within the city.
Within the city or within a county.
But Park City has, let's not look to Park City, they have
No, I'm just-
so many problems
Yeah,
with
that-
housing and
Yeah,
congestion,
But is that-
all kinds of things.
Does that mean, help me understand that a little bit, Corey, does that mean like almost like a density bonus in a way? So let's say that if we were to develop the hillside, it would be 4 units per acre, most likely. But we say, we're not gonna develop the hillside, so we're gonna transfer those 4 units to acre somewhere else that is also already 4, now does it become 8, or?
it's really kind of, it can be a density bonus, and you can, and that's why I said the planner thought it to me is like, it's 4 units an acre, we'll give you 6 if 2 of them are moderate income housing. That's one way of looking at it. Probably not practical, but that's one way. Most of the time, in the transfer of development rights, the density's already a little bit lower and intended to be that way for receiving to get to what they're willing to accept. So it's we've already decided this area is 8 units an acre. We're going to drop it to 6. You can transfer in 2 more if you go buy it from the receiving zone. And it's a place that you've already established. I'm okay with that density.
You buy it from the city?
The landowner becomes the land use version of a Bitcoin.
Wait, let me see where that's in the book.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we got some good quotes tonight.
Wow, we're on, yeah.
So you've already decided the receiving zone ultimate density,
Yeah.
but you can set it at so that it encourages the purchase and transfer to complicated program.
Yeah.
And that's why I brought that up as an example is they're saying that, but that's not a simple task to do. So it's a way to think about it. Go back to R, they're now giving credit for internal accessory dwelling units when you don't do any impact fees. Well, maybe we should have delayed the accessory dwelling units because we don't require impact fees. So that goes out the window for us.
Yeah, let's pick that one.
Can we just choose that one?
That was very clear in the training. You can't use past
we,
efforts to satisfy.
Can we then
New
now start
efforts.
charging an impact fee for
Let's
accessory
charge it,
dwelling
yeah,
units?
and then we'll suddenly stop.
I guess you could play that game, but I think they're pretty clear that they're going to be, Workforce Services is evaluating this, and they're going to supposedly flag, because the idea is that once you accomplish a strategy, you will add one in. Not
I
just.
thought you said we had to choose 3,
You choose 3 to begin with.
and we're choosing 3 from this list we see before us?
Well, we have to decide if we're choosing 3 or 5, depending on what we want to do.
3 or 5?
What's the benefit of choosing 5? Wait, are you gonna get there, Corey? Okay, hang on a minute.
I'm really good at asking questions.
No, you're good. So I bring that up. Another one that you see, I think, is O, one page back up, Mackenzie, O. This used to be all of those strategies combined into one. And so now you're looking at partnership examples. And I'll go back to Park City. It's a bad example, but I'm very familiar with Park City and Summit County, having worked there. So the example of a program up there for this, and it's intense, and that's why I'm saying these goals are not, they can be meaty. Wasatch County is complaining because most of the employees working in Park City and the resorts are living, not most, but a lot are predominantly living in Heber City. And so Wasatch County is feeling like, hey, we're taking the predominant worker force, supplying their housing for you, and you're not doing anything about it. And so they came up with a program to partner two counties together. They created a housing coalition. They created ordinances that when you develop in Park City, you pay into that program. And that program then is a nonprofit. They go and buy the land and they build units under that and manage. They have 600, as of a couple of years ago, they have 600 units that coalition. Does that solve Park City's affordable housing program? Oh, no, 600 units is not going to do that.
No.
But that's an example where they're making a demonstrated effort. And again, you're dealing with Park City. Somebody is going to pay several $1 million as a developer and say, yeah, I'll fund something over here because I got lots of money coming in because I know somebody will pay that price because they want to be in Park City. You know, so we're not, but that's the example of now you're trying to create these, you know, working with the housing coalition, working with your county, working with the state, trying to come up with a program. And so I just bring that up as examples of you're picking three, but they're going back through and making it a little tougher to make it too easy.
What if we pick one, but we're unsuccessful at it?
Well, that's a good thing to come back up. So next slide that goes to 3 options to consider, and we'll get to that. So we're required to pick 3 options by October 1st. And so we can pick option 1, do 3. We're not a fixed guideway system, so we don't have to do the 4th. We meet the base requirement. And you can just reaffirm the strategies you've already picked. If you haven't done them or haven't accomplished them, you can just reaffirm those strategies and redo it. Option 2 is, I think, likely where we're going to at least land, is that we're going to probably pick some new strategies because we've accomplished one. So we're going to have to reevaluate what we're willing to tackle because there's an important component that we have to add once we pick the strategy. Option 3 is now listing where there's this potential penalty beyond the base requirement. And so, let's see, I'm trying to think of, let's go to
What strategy did we accomplish?
the accessory dwelling units.
Oh,
Which then became,
Okay, so
anyway.
I'm trying to look where they have. So go to 5 where it says incentive and restrictions, down further in the report. You
Say
may
that
come
again?
back up to the timeline. Yeah, right here, incentives and restrictions. Okay? Look at the right-hand side. TIF fundings, double T and single T TIF fundings, you get priority consideration for those funds if you've picked 5.
Are we seeking these funds?
Do we get TIF already? How much do we
Use
get?
TIF funds. I'd have to report back to you on what we've done. We've done it for our bike lane trails. I know we've done it partially for some monies, I think the crossing of the bridge. And then we use some UDOT leftover money for the year for the bridge crossing, but we do use some of these funds. And if we're competing in an application for those funds, and we've picked 3, and in equal values picked 5, oversimplifying it, priority goes to the community that picked 5.
So this TIF funding is used for specific projects usually, not necessarily just general maintenance of transportation, roads, whatever else, right?
No, these are all those fundings that we're looking for alternative transportation. I don't know what else we use them. Lisa, do you know what the engineering's used them for in the past?
Not any others that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, but we do use them. Does that mean we won't get them? Not necessarily saying that, but I think,
So if you do 3, You're not getting TIF funding? You're just not getting penalized?
You may still get TIF funding based
To the bottom
on,
of the barrel?
but you may end up in the bottom of the barrel, because there's more criteria.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, there's more criteria. There's the value of the project.
Yes.
That's part of it. But if, in simple, all things being equal
Yeah.
between two projects, 5 will get the default prioritization.
Feels like the state version of pay to play.
It's a incentive,
Uh-huh.
and that's the whole point,
Uh-huh.
is it says if you do 5 or more, that's an incentive.
Not getting your knees broken is also an incentive.
If they're not saying that you're not gonna get TIF funding,
a shame if,
Have you spoke to other cities and like their, in our area, their disposition to hit the 3 or the 5?
No, I don't know the measure of,
I look at our surrounding
impetus.
cities and it's like, we have the least amount of space to develop.
yep.
Farmington's got space. Bountiful's got space. West Bountiful, got space. North Salt Lake, space. We have very limited space. We're in a very unique city. We're kind of bound by a mountain and a lake that's going away, but still,
Move into it.
you know, but we can't, I mean, but it's the bird refuge. You know, we're not moving into the
oh,
bird
you're,
refuge.
you're
So,
preaching to the choir.
I'm okay if we don't get TIF funding and if we only do 3, like.
Yeah, and I think we would come back later to report what we do, what others in the city staff think about the TIF funding and the value of it, and before we made that policy. But yeah, I see that. It's not that you won't get it, they're just trying to say, all things being equal, we'll
And
Up you
when
down.
you apply for these kinds of fundings, they really like cities that are booming and growing and not cities that are just cities. Just running the little.
You're
you know.
now stirring the left-hand side of Corey's head, and I gotta keep that under control. I just give you the right-hand side of my head, because
so,
I get concerns on multiple levels and could get on a soapbox.
is it time for us to start making comments, or?
Well, one more thing. So go back to the annual reporting 2022 slide. Okay, so by October 1st, look in the center, annual report due. Very simple report this year. Subsequent years will be more detailed, and workforce services,
Did last year.
yeah. And workforce services has better tools and funding to come up with their data scenario that they've got to get done by December 1st. But we have those 2 bullet points that list in there. Identify the selected strategies, so we know we got to get to 3 and decide if we're going to get to 5, or we split it and do 4 and see how we shake out in the element. Key component, though, and why this is important to have this discussion and start discussing. You have to add an implementation plan and timeline for your strategies. You can't just pick the strategy and say, it'll take me 10 years to get to it. Now, if you pick a complicated strategy and you have some time period to accomplish that, yeah, they're not looking at that as a penalty. But you have to come up with these implementation, because your report's going to start saying that. Now, go back to the statement, Heidi, Becky, you said, what happens if we do something, and what is it?
What if we don't, what if we choose one and we fail?
Yeah. That's on the new reporting. So the new reporting system will say, what did you do? How did the market respond? What were the hurdles associated with it? And any suggestions the state can help. So they're looking at subsequent report years to start classifying how is it working. I'm not sure it's the best way, but it's a way that we haven't had in the past. We've adopted accessory dwelling units. One application, 5, 6 people with serious interest.
That was just internal, not external, right?
Yeah, just the internal, not the detached. And that's another thing that gets reported. For some reason, they want to know how many ADU units get built in your town each year.
Have they, once we choose an action and we have a methodology and a plan and a strategy with implementation, if it is a long-term situation, can that be held over for the next year?
Yeah, if you have a complicated, so an example would be, is one of the strategies is to use your RDA funds to preserve and keep, affordable housing there. So, we've used those funds in the past for Pheasant Brook and for Cedar Springs. We've done some improvements to their drainage, some of their infrastructure to preserve that. And so that is an ongoing strategy. The issue is if we pick that strategy, we can't say, well, we'll keep looking at it, we keep looking at it. That's where we're gonna get intense and start coupling with the RDA
Yeah.
and the staff over the RDA and start figuring out, okay, we have some funds, 10%'s gotta be set away. We gotta start looking and actively soliciting projects for the expenditure of those funds, and then report that. So that can be an ongoing strategy, but I think if you just said, oops, 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 oops,
Yeah.
not gonna work out, so.
Or we could do one of those convoluted coalitions you're talking about, and that'll take us till 2050, I think, to get done.
And I pick that as 4 or 5.
Great.
I was thinking it's 3.
So I just wanted you to be able to know what we're up against. By October 1st, we have to pick 3 to 5 strategies, depending on our policy, and we have to add an implementation deadline, program, and guideline associated with that. And that's what we will return in this year by October 1st. And I think that's where we have to look back and say, what are we really trying to roll up our sleeves and attempt to do? It doesn't mean that we're successful. But I think an RDA fund already, we play with 3 different RDA, CDA areas. We're supposed to expend those funds. That's something that we should identify as part of one of the 3 or 5 and start getting more serious in the discussion with the council on creating opportunities for that to actually occur.
So are you, tell me what the process is. Are you looking for us to say, gosh, we like these? Or are you going to say, I like these, city likes these? Like, how do we choose?
Yeah, I think my envision is really preliminary because I'm just trying to get this discussion going. Next week, I do this with the city council. It's more of just understanding what's there, what the program is, what the expectations. I would anticipate that we would have some type of meeting between the 2 bodies, and that staff would send out some suggested lists that probably, and why those are suggestions for the city to consider, and that the 2 bodies could come up with
And
a
then is it
debate with
something-
each other.
Is this something the planning commission has to recommend to the city council to approve?
Because we will
Standard process, okay.
we will have to amend our moderate income housing element and have the hearings and the recommendations to the.
We have to have do you have to have a public hearing?
Yeah.
It's part of the general
Okay,
plan.
okay.
Do the strategies have to be off this list?
They have to be 3, I think there's 1 in there, there used to be 1 in there, I haven't read every one. 1 in there said other programs, but then now instead of just other programs the city says fit, other programs that you identify and have the outcome and implementation.
They had some sample ideas that we could pull from. What you're seeing and what you're looking at right now is what we had previously, right?
Well, this was
Looked at.
previously, this is now.
That's what we're looking at now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't highlight to you the 3 selected. What we have on the now, or the previously, is we listed all of the previous ones, and then we just picked 3 from that list. And one of them was a simple one, and other things the city might consider.
But this is a very aggressive timeline. October is very aggressive.
That's why I
To have a
wanted,
public hearing to make it, like, backtracking to that process.
yeah, so I
it's very
think in
aggressive.
July, when it's after the budget, we need to meet, have some type of cohesive direction to go, so that we can start drafting that for August and September adoption,
Yeah.
so that we can meet the October
And
1st
you still
deadline.
have to have time to create your report to submit by October.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is this did you create this?
No, this is Utah League of Cities
From
and
the
Towns
state.
slides. I just cut out the,
Stuff we didn't need.
yeah, the dedicated transportation plans that you have to do.
Cool, thanks.
All right,
Yeah, thanks, Corey. We'll, look forward to seeing this again, and,
Can I just make a statement here?
yeah.
I think this is a great discussion, and I know, we talk about, I know this is coming from from the state, and we have to fulfill the, what is required here. But I was recently at a summit where Natalie Gochner was speaking, and she, if you don't know, is Kempsey Gardner, executive director, and she does not mince words. She's an extremely, extremely smart woman. And she specifically looks at, was looking at the economic outlook of our state. And she said, I'm gonna just read this real quick. Housing affordability is the greatest risk to the Utah economy. And there was a whole conversation about, obviously, what has happened in the past little bit everywhere in the country, but specifically Utah's economy and how housing affordability plays a role, not just in, oh, we need to have a place for my kid to stay, or we need a place that's like makes people feel good or whatever. This is truly a risk to our economy, which then affects all of us. So, I mean, we know that, but I just wanted to reiterate that and say that while this is, brought down from the state, it is incredibly important. And I think as we consider what we can do, if we keep looking at roadblocks to what the limitations are within our city, we're going to see this as roadblocks and something coming down from the state. But if we look at this as a way for us to address a real serious concern for our state, for our city, for our region, then I think that will allow us to kind of find better solutions and find a way to make it work within what it looks like in our city.
Yeah, as maybe a slight counterpoint to some of that stuff, I think that affordable housing is important. I don't particularly like this program because it feels too much like government meddling in the market. And I wish that, a lot of that stuff would just be left to the market to allocate those resources most efficiently, as it tends to do. I feel like housing in general is just needed across the board because, we've seen that before. Corey's mentioned this, and we've seen it before where we think, oh yeah, this is going to be some great affordable housing. We build it, those townhomes are suddenly selling for $500,000, $600,000. That's not affordable. So what we just need is more housing. I'm excited for the Symphony development up north end of town to just give us a shot of a whole bunch of housing. Yeah, some of it's going to be expensive. Some of it's going to be really high end, but we'll have people moving out of mid-range housing into that stuff, and there'll be this trickle-down effect that happens with that. So I kind of wish that the state would butt out to an extent and let the market do its thing.
Well, and to be clear, I am not saying that I want the state to butt in. I'm not saying I promote this
Right.
plan and or am super excited about it. I want to be clear on that. But I am saying that housing affordability is the greatest threat to our economy. So when government gets involved, it's usually because of market failure. That's when government should be involved, right? So if we're looking at what is happening now in our state and then what will be happening projected, that is why they're getting involved. I'm not saying supportive of this, I'm just explaining that's typically when government gets involved. So
Yeah.
I feel like we can find some solutions within the framework of our city, and I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and I'm looking forward to some future conversations about it, so. All right, let's move on then to the next item on the agenda, back to Corey for our Community Development Director's report, City Council report.
Yeah, we've got I think we've added an item, so you have the Hogan Steel final site plan. You've seen that recently under the conceptual PDO that they were approved for. They're coming back. I think we have another residential lot. Is that right, Mackenzie?
I don't think it meets the May 25th.
Okay, all right. So I think the Moser lot is coming in. The council did adopt the water efficient landscaping ordinance. It was sent, or has been, not the right term, to Weber Basin. John Perry said thank you. Did not come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, we're getting tons of calls on it.
Believe it.
You know, just, they need to make the application. Weaver Basin, what's interesting is there's an independent site where the application goes in. Weaver Basin receives that, and they slightly have some modifications to the expectations. But they'll come out and schedule inspection of your park strip, and then you do the work, and then they come back and inspect it again for qualifying. One clarity that's out there is they have to see your park strip in the condition it is now, not you've ripped it out,
And it has to be alive.
and it has to be alive.
Yeah, and it can't be a non-installed landscape.
Yeah.
Like I just built my house and
Right.
I want to do this in my park strip. It has to be an established landscape.
And then just be aware, they have some incentives for older toilets and the replacement of that. And again, it's all funding on how much money they have, so not everybody's going to get funded, but they did say if you make application and accept it, you'll be in that line.
Sign up for like next year.
What are we doing are we promoting or educating our citizens about this program?
My understanding is Bryce King, who is our recreation coordinator slash public,
Affairs?
person,
Public
is
information
putting
officer.
together the flyer and the thing, and announcement on those, on the website. I don't know whether they're sending it out in the utility bill, but they're carrying that forward.
Did the city council make any changes to what we sent them, or did
Nope.
they? Okay, interesting.
No, they took a similar position as we like the idea that we're encouraging people, but we're not ready to make it mandatory.
Okay.
Just in addition, I know Commissioner Shagrud asked a question of it. The city council also adopted a separate ordinance in the municipal code on use of secondary water, and Lisa knows the details of
Or
that better than
culinary
I do.
water.
Or
Yeah, so, remember in our zoning code, we sort of introduced the topic of clarifying that you cannot use culinary water for irrigation purposes if you have access to secondary water. So the council wanted to be very proactive, and so along with the zoning amendments on the park strip, they asked staff to prepare ordinances to our water code that made it very clear, hopefully, that you cannot use culinary water for irrigation purposes if you have access to secondary water. Obviously, on the west side of the freeway, they don't. There's some exceptions for when and then we added the time restrictions, and so we put that in both our culinary water section of the code and our irrigation. So, and it also said if you have secondary water, because this was the gap, if you have access to secondary water, you have to connect to it, and you cannot connect to culinary. So that was our real gap, so we closed that gap, and also, I think it's a great time. I don't, obviously in the news, I was just listening to something this morning, they were talking about in St. George, they're adopting new ordinances, so I think a lot of cities are trying to address that and be proactive as much as we can.
Are there penalties? Did we put penalties in for?
It's just a standard Class B misdemeanor if you violate a code in our water code.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I think now the ordinance is very clear. I think it was there, but, when you're trying to make an enforcement and take that through the appeal process, this is going to make it a lot easier for
I
us.
do think, Commissioner Shagrud, you brought up the issue of gardens. I did go talk to Mike a little bit about it. Yes, it means gardens, and there are people that have plants on their back porch and probably go in the house and come back out with water. He indicated that, look, I'm going to be really looking for excessive use and elements like that, or some significant
I think that's where
notice.
like a meter comes in.
Yeah.
Because like my parents have a Weaver Basin meter, and they've just said, you get this much. When you go over that meter reading, then you get a fine.
Right.
And after I had communicated with you, I went to Dual Creek's website, and they have a whole different set of rules for Dual Creek irrigation, different than Weaver Basin irrigation.
Right.
So you really have to look where your water comes from to know what set of rules you have to follow.
And so Mike, our Public Works Director, said he got permission from the council to add some hours to the meter reader. And he prefers to call, if you know Mike, he's very much a True Grit fan. He calls the meter reader a water wrangler, because he doesn't want the water meter to be a water enforcer. So the idea is if we notice some things If the meter reader notices something, maybe pass out some literature, but doesn't want the confrontation to take place. If there's an actual violation, that's going to be left to the water department to manage, not the meter reader to be doing that. So there's kind of a public education effort of that. The other issue that you brought up, that was a good point. No, the ordinance doesn't talk about pools and spas and water slides. He said, the pool and the spa is a captured basin. Yeah, they may use it, but it's captured and reused and reused and reused. Not ready to say you can't build pools in the city. He's not ready to go that direction.
But what about like the slip and slide?
Hey, he said it comes down to how much water is being wasted. He said if I can see something that's, grossly wasting water, yeah. He would expect that if they see it or notice it, they would just educate the individual that that's probably, as he likes to say, the water you save this year might be the water you drink next year.
But maybe you have a very proactive person in there saying, well, I'm gonna let the kids slip and slide today, and I'm not gonna water, right? And
Yeah.
the water that I use on the slip and slide becomes the water I use to
Yeah,
water
and
the
I
yard.
think-
I mean, there's a way.
And I think that's why he's just saying is
Yeah.
if it's excessive use,
Over and over and
Yeah.
over.
If you're doing
and
8
over.
hours of slip and slide every day,
Might be too much.
but yeah, he said,
That's
yeah, I don't think it's a smart idea to go down the road of saying you can't buy a jacuzzi and you can't buy a pool and
No,
Right.
fill it.
yeah.
it's not a good idea.
Will we get there? I don't know.
But again, I think that comes back to your meter, right? And you have the ability to put those regulations on what your allotment is with your meter. And when you go over that, you pay for it
Right,
exponentially higher than your normal rate.
right.
And I think, I'm ready for meters on my secondary water, if you can't tell.
But that's it, unless you want to talk about your goals.
Well, yeah, so Corey, could you briefly talk about our funding that we did not get for the general plan?
Yeah, so the city set aside $80,000 in the planning and zoning budget for a general plan update. We were seeking more of that to add in and partner an economic study. We failed to make it under the Wasatch Front Regional Council. I contacted them and said, hey, did we just plainly miss the mark? And it came back with Wasatch Front Regional Council. General plans are hard for them to qualify and fund, given their limited funds. Then they were kicked to UDOT, because it's a two-part, UDOT takes it, and I have not had conversation with UDOT. I can only surmise that our general plan is not facilitating infrastructure improvements that they may be worried about, and so we didn't fall high. Doesn't mean it's not important, we just didn't fall high, is my assumption on their list. Talked to the city manager. We're still in the middle of budget. They're still looking at some cuts in the budget. And this is all balancing because there's some property tax rates hikes, how far ago, there's some water user fee hikes. And, how much is there with the whole idea of if there's a recession. There's been a long discussion with the council that way. The general plan still sits with the money there. But there's also some talk by myself and some others. What could we do internally? Could we focus on some strategic edits rather than the whole plan edit for this year? It's still I'm still trying to find out clarity from them because there's a push from some council members to do a specific edit to the alternative transportation plan that was a joint effort done in 2020, and how do we implement that in? And so, is the economic study still a part of it? I'm not sure. So I did get the idea that there is an attempt to preserve the funds if possible. It's not just we're going to go in there and yank it away now that we got rejected. But just don't know where they sit on the budget.
So Corey, if maybe we're not doing the general plan, could we pick up the South Main Street stuff that we put aside when the pandemic started? It's not an
Could you,
election,
yes.
it's not an election year, Corey.
Oh.
So,
Yeah. No, I think,
That's the truth.
no, I think that's a worthy suggestion that we're back into where we can hold some public participation should we should we bring that up and solve that long-standing matter?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we were on a pretty good cadence and then the pandemic killed it, you know, and.
Well, it was gonna heavy public participation, and
We were-
it just killed us that way.
Yeah, and we were just getting started to go down the line of more public participation and whatever else. So, you know, that's one of my thoughts is that this year's not an election year, at least a municipal election year, right? So,
I think it's a good idea to pick up where maybe not where we left off, one step back.
Yeah, back
Get our
up a
feet
step.
back onto the ground and
Sure.
then
because
head
we do
forward.
have quite a few new commissioners. Were you here for that? You were here for that. But you two were not, right?
Mason was.
I don't think so.
Well, you weren't. I know you
Not
weren't.
ringing a bell.
Yeah. That's okay. So we have some new commissioners. Matt and obviously Sean, our newest commissioner, were not here for that, so.
And I think we should be looking at that July timeframe to start setting that, because that'll be just after the adoption of, there was truth and taxation, so there'll be an operating budget. But it'll open up some space till they do the truth and taxation hearing. So think of some of those things, yeah. I think
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Okay. Really quickly, before we go into the minutes, thinking back on our last meeting, because this was in our minutes, the UDOT Environmental Impact Study presentation. If you haven't had an opportunity to go to the website and add some comments, do it. We're running out of time, isn't it?
The 13th.
May 13th, yeah.
I've
So
been
you-
commenting on every day.
Oh, the 13th, yeah.
you've been commenting every day?
Every day. I come up with something new.
Well, I started at the south end and I worked my way north. And then I went on the north end and worked my way south, kind of thinking about traveling along there.
And then you gotta think about going,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, if you haven't had a chance to go to the website and add some comments, go do it. You're running out of time.
Thank you for the reminder.
Okay. All right, on that note, let's talk about our minutes that we had from the April 13th meeting. Does anybody have any comments or changes for page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Nope. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept the minutes of the April 13th, 2022 Planning Commission as unamended.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All together, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We
Aye.
are adjourned.